has joined the conference.
In this segment, we'll start with the basics of mobile money agent commissions. We'll then examine each of the variables that impact agent profitability and provide some real-world examples of how deployments have gone about maximizing them. We'll also, of course, be creating a set of commissions for our service. So some people wonder why we need to pay agents at all. And to answer this question, let's think through everything that customers rely on agents to deliver and what each implies from an agent's perspective. In many cases, agents are asked by mobile operators to register customers and educate them on how to use the service. And this takes a lot of time. One East African deployment estimates that it takes 30 minutes to teach a customer how to use their service. So if agents aren't paid for an activity like this, they're unlikely to offer up their staff's time to fill out forms and educate customers. Agents are also asked to sell e-money to customers every time a customer wants to cash in. But for agents to deliver the service, they need to tie up their valuable working capital in an e-money account. And there's an opportunity cost here, because that's working capital that the agent otherwise could have invested somewhere else. On the other hand, agents are also asked to buy e-money from customers every time a customer wants to cash out. But to do this, agents need to carry an inventory of physical cash. And this is often easier said than done, or in some cases, it can actually even be quite dangerous. Now finally, agents are asked to create channel visibility for the service. Customers want to see clearly marked tariff posts on the wall, and they want to be able to easily spot an agent from the street. But in many cases, agent wall space is valuable, and if mobile money isn't an important enough business, there's usually somebody else ready to pay them more for that space. So as a general principle, we're going to need to pay our agents in a way that's commensurate with the time it takes for them to do an activity and the money they must invest in float. We're also going to need to pay agents even for the activities we aren't necessarily charging customers for. We'll come back to these principles in a minute when we're designing the commissions for our service. But first, there's one other concept to cover off, and that is how the economics of being a mobile money agent differ from being an airtime retailer. In many cases, one of the first questions a mobile operator will be asked by agents when presenting a service to them is how the business is the same or different from selling airtime, which is something that they've probably done for many years now. So before designing a set of commissions, it's important to understand these differences, and there are three very important ones. First, the cash flows are different for selling airtime and offering mobile money. When it comes to airtime, an agent simply buys a stock of cards at a discount, and as soon as he's sold them all, he's earned back his principal as well as his profit margin. But for mobile money, agents often have to wait for some time to be paid their commissions. So there's a delay here that some agents won't be familiar with. The second difference is that in some cases, the restocking frequency for mobile money is lower than for airtime. For airtime, once an agent has sold all of his scratch cards, he's left with a pile of cash. But he can't in turn sell that pile of cash as more airtime. He's out of inventory. With mobile money, on the other hand, there are some instances where agents will both buy e-money from customers and sell e-money to customers in some amount of balance. And the more balance there is between buying and selling, the less need an agent will have to restock his inventory. And finally, the foot traffic benefits associated with offering mobile money are different from those associated with selling airtime. In most markets, airtime is a ubiquitous service. Nearly every retailer offers it. And because mobile money will be less widely available for at least some time, it's reasonable to think that agents will benefit in a unique way from foot traffic increases, whereas in most cases they otherwise wouldn't from selling airtime. Of course, please note that we assume in this exercise that the benefits of foot traffic is not a compelling enough reason alone for agents to offer mobile money. We assume that an agent must be profitable on the basis of transaction revenues for him to be interested in offering mobile money as a service. So it's clear then that for agents, offering mobile money is incredibly different than selling airtime. It probably makes sense then to start with the basics and understand each of the factors that will impact an agent's profitability. And I've been very careful to use the word profit here and not simply commission, because as we'll see in just a minute, the commissions that we'll lay out in our strategy for our service are actually just one component of a broader equation that impacts whether agents earn a good return from providing mobile money, and in turn, whether they're happy and engaged. Okay, so along the left, you can see that we've listed 5 different variables. Each of these variables impacts the profitability of an agent, and the way in which it does so is laid out in the equations along the right. Broadly speaking, an agent's profitability is a function of his profit margin times his asset turnover. So his profit margin times his asset turnover. Or, put another way, it's equal to his commissions minus his restocking costs divided by his investment, which for mobile money is his pool of float. Now, for the purposes of the next couple of slides, we'll use the formula at the bottom to run our scenario analysis. It's important to note that this formula really just approximates reality. It's not 100% real world perfect, but it will give us a good stylized way of seeing how these variables work. Now, if you find any of these equations confusing, don't worry. All you really need to understand are the variables that underpin them and what good looks like for each one of them. So the first variable is float. This is the amount of e-money and or physical cash that an agent must have on hand to be able to transact. The second variable is restocking cost. This is the cost an agent incurs to restock his cash or e-money float balance. The third variable is volume of transactions. This is the volume of cash in and cash out transactions performed each day by an agent. The fourth variable is average commission value. This is the average commission earned for performing cash in and cash out transactions. And the fifth variable is the average transaction value. So this is the average value of cash in and cash out transactions that are performed by a customer. So that's the entire list of variables, but really, most providers start the process by simply taking a crack at one of them, commissions. So let's go back to our example and try to create some of our own. Now, we're not going to be too stringent with our guidelines. We'll just say that the value of our commissions needs to be low enough that we as a mobile operator are earning an acceptable profit, and they must be high enough that the agent is also earning an acceptable profit. And by way of structure, we know that we're going to have to pay our agents for every activity that they perform. So if we create a new column beside our tariff sheet, we see that we're going to need to pay agents for accepting deposits and for processing withdrawals. There's nothing for an agent to do in terms of a P2P transfer, so we don't need to pay him for that. And you can note that for simplicity, we're just assuming that an agent gets paid the same commission whether they're serving a registered or an unregistered customer. So we won't fill in those blanks. We'll just use the registered figures. So we do some analysis, and as a first pass, we fill out our commissions. And the first thing that we do is that we make sure that we're going to earn an acceptable profit end-to-end for P2P transfers. And as you can see from the graph on the right, we are indeed. The line you see is our margin. It's the sum of the fees that we're charging to send at each value minus the commissions that we're paying at each value to agents. And you can see that our margin is always somewhere between 45% and 65%. This is generally in line with industry averages. We see most mobile operators earning between 45 and 60% margins here. So the next thing we need to check is whether our agents are making any money. But unfortunately, it looks like they're not. When we run the numbers using the variables at the bottom, it looks like our agents are earning a negative return on assets and losing money each day by offering this service. So what can we do? Well, let's go back to our agent commissions table. And let's jack up the commissions, because we need to find a way for our agents to make money. So let's fill in some new commissions, and let's basically triple our old ones. So now, agents are going to earn 90 cents for accepting deposits, and between $1.80 and $7.20 for processing withdrawals. And we look again at our agents, and not surprisingly, now they're making money. So that's good. We see that they're earning a huge return on assets, 131%, and a daily profit of $3.60. That's not bad. We're in the black now. But the bad news is we as a mobile operator are losing money. And you probably could have eyeballed this just by comparing our fees and our commissions. So it looks like we've got a problem. We can't seem to find a rate where our agents are profitable, and so are we. So what are our options then? Well, as a mobile operator, we have more control over some of the agent profitability variables than others. We've got complete control over the average commission value, but as we've just established, playing with that variable hasn't been enough. There's not much we can really do about customers' average transaction values. We might be able to shape them by the prices that we charge, but let's focus on the low-hanging fruit for now. This leaves us with three variables then: float, restocking cost, and the volume of transactions. All of these are at least somewhat in our control. So to inspire our thinking a little bit about how we might augment our approach for MMU-PESA, let's look at some real-world examples of how deployments have influenced these three variables. Now, the first example we'll look at comes from Asia. And in this scenario, we examine a mobile operator who has recently launched a mobile money service. And their strategy has basically been to reduce the restocking cost and amount of float that its agents must hold by tasking their own existing airtime sales reps with visiting agents on a regular basis. So every time an airtime sales rep visits an agent, they rebalance that agent's float, either by loading him up with physical cash or by loading him up with e-money. Now, by implementing this model, what the MNO has done is they've transferred the restocking cost away from each individual agent and said, we're going to take responsibility for this activity as a mobile operator. But you can understand why they might do this. The mobile operator already has a huge team in the field, and they're in a position to rebalance the float more efficiently than most agents would on an individual basis. Of course, the trade-off they might ask to agents to make an exchange is to accept a lower commission than they otherwise might have, given that they no longer have to bear this restocking cost. So with this in mind, let's come back to our example. So currently, our agent's restocking cost is $15. This includes the cost of a bus ride he takes into town to get cash at a bank branch, and it also includes the opportunity cost he's incurred by closing his shop and missing out on sales. So if we were able to all but eliminate restocking costs for him, and in turn pay him the commissions we originally wanted to, we see that this agent would actually become profitable, and so would we. So when we reduce his restocking costs from $15 to $1, we see that this agent earns a 40% return on assets and a daily profit of $1.10. Let's look at another example. So this example comes from CellPay, which is a mobile money service operating in Zambia. CellPay is basically sought to reduce the amount of float that its agents need to hold by creating customized minimum liquidity requirements. $1,500 for agents that operate in the main city of Lusaka, which is the capital city of Zambia, and $500 for agents that operate in the countryside. Now, they customize their minimum liquidity thresholds because they know that some agents will see higher transaction volumes than others, and therefore will need more float. They also know that some urban agents will have an easier time tying up money in float than rural ones would. So if we made a similar change for our imaginary agent and reduced the float level from $1,000 to $800, we see that his daily profit stays pretty much the same, but his return on assets increases from 40 to 49%. So we've made this agent's life better by offering him a better return on his assets. So now, with our float requirements and restocking costs in order, it's time to do perhaps the most important thing of all: market the service to drive transaction volumes to agents. Now, there's no secret here. One of the most important variables in this equation is the volume of transactions that an agent sees. If there's no volume, nothing else matters. So let's assume that we invest a good amount of money in marketing now. And what we'd see is a volume of transactions increasing from 2 per day to 30 per day. And of course, our agents' return on assets and their daily profit are through the roof. With that, we'll pause and take some questions from the group.